Here, you can exercise your rights to freedom every day without leaving your home. We don't just say, we do. It's the Stain City way.
A man's place is as the head of the household, taking care of everyone, breadwinner, right? Here's one that I seem to still be hearing in 2018. A woman's place is at home, raising the children. A man must ask the woman for her hand in marriage and not the other way around. If you suddenly feel like you've just traveled to the 1950s, don't stress, we're still in 2018. For as long as men and women have coexisted in romantic relationships, they've followed predetermined rules. But over time, some of these rules have changed. These days, it's not uncommon for roles between men and women to be turned on their head. If a woman can propose to a man, then a father can assume the role, right, of stay-at-home dad while his wife runs the country. Just like the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Her husband is at home looking after the kids. Today we're looking at dating and relationship rules in 2018 and asking whether some of these rules need to change. Good evening and welcome to Real Talk right here on SABC 3 with myself, Anele Mdoda. So to kick things off, we welcome back our resident relationship coach, Kofi Ofori-Boateng. He's joined by a writer and social media commentator on all things relationships-based and so much more, Zukiswa Zimela. Hello guys, welcome.
Hello.
Okay, I've already fanned over your dress and your earrings and your shoes and everything.
Thank you.
High five, well done, Swanga Bazali. So the first thing I wanted to ask you guys is, you know, we like to say in the ideal world. And I'm not going to talk about the ideal world. I'm going to talk about the world that we're currently in. Kofi, as a man, do you feel like there are certain expectations that are upon you as a man in a relationship?
Most definitely. There will always be expectations. It just depends on how those expectations are communicated and how many of those I can actually live up to. So again, that's also going to require communication from my part. But yes, there will always be an expectation for me to do certain things.
Like?
Whether it's to, well, again, it depends on the individual. So I consider myself fairly traditional, even though most people wouldn't agree. My nature is to bring home the bacon. That's my nature. But at the same time, I can respect a woman who does the same. In fact, I find that attractive. So I would not be in competition or intimidated by you if you were to do the exact same thing. But for some guys, it might be an issue because that is not necessarily their makeup or what they're used to. So
Gisa, in fact, you actually now phrasing it better than what I did, because I said, what are the expectations that you feel and that even without any pressure that you just have on yourself? But the correct way to put it is what you just said. What is your nature in relationships? I want that to be our departing point. What's your nature?
Okay, so for me, I think like it's very difficult to say that one person needs to do one thing for you know, based on societal pressures and societal norms. I always say that there are like billions of people on this earth and everybody's expectation is different. And I think the problem and the challenges comes when we stick to one thing. So we say all men must be providers and all women must be subservient. There's so many people, so it's not going to work for everybody. And I think, you know, you need to get to a point where you yourself are interrogating what is it that I want, and am I able to find somebody who wants, you know, the same thing as me, and can we come together and make that happen? If not, then, you know, there's always going to be friction and there's always going to be trouble. Okay,
now that's an evolved way of thinking, right?
Yes.
Which is lovely, which is where we want to be headed to. What are we conditioned as women to want, to expect, to believe?
Okay, so I think like for most women, we were brought up to kind of be mothers and to be nurturing, and conversely, we were also brought up to be career women, because we, you know, we're modern women. A lot of women work, whether, you know, you have a high-flying job or a normal job, you work. And you also have to come home and take care of the home. So it's those two things for you that are fighting yourself. You're fighting yourself of those two things. And you get into a relationship where you'd like someone to see you as a person, but also you want to be wife material. So you feel
wife
like,
material.
Do you know what I mean?
That's the one.
You know, sometimes you feel like I should be taking care of this guy, but you've just worked like a 40-hour week and you're exhausted and you don't have the time to do it. And you're fighting yourself because you're thinking, am I actually serving this relationship based on what you were raised? Your parents would raise you, you know, to be Mama Sekai, to raise the children and to be like that. So, yeah. Okay,
so Kofi, are men, and sorry to always put this on you, but you're the only man here, so you're going to answer it. Yeah. Are men aware that this is a struggle that we are constantly battling with, like being the career person that works, you know, and then still being, you know, a girlfriend, being a wife, being a mother, and balancing that, and then still having to take care of ourselves at the end of that?
Men are very aware of it. We have some that, to use your words, have evolved. And who have accepted it and embraced it. You have those who are ignoring it and acting like it's not a reality at all, but more of a reality that they don't want to accept. And then you have the others who just basically want to play the fence as much as they possibly can until a real demand is put on them. You used a very interesting word earlier. You said a prescribed set of rules. And my question to that would be, whose rules? Society is a very dynamic thing. And society, I mean, our society especially is a very complex one because we have our indigenous, you know, cultural mores and traditions, and then we have colonial ones that have been adopted as well. So what a lot of African men don't know is that what we've done is we've amalgamated the two to such an extent that we can't really tell the difference. And you know, something like a woman working now is considered, oh my goodness, that is so progressive. But if you look at pre-colonial African history, women were doing that. If for a woman to ask a man to marry her or to approach a man with marriage, now is considered, oh my goodness, it's a travesty. But African culture, to this day, still entertains the notion of women approaching a man's family for marriage. So it's a whole thing of whose rules, whose society, and what's being dictated. Your education needs to be interrogated. Who educated you, especially within the African context? Who educated you? You need to question all of these things, and then perhaps we can start having the conversation about what a woman's true role is in the world that we live in.
Zukiswa, I mean, I know you used to write about this when you still blog for Destiny, do you? No, oh, pity, Zukiswa. Look at you, you left us. But there's this misconception that love is the most natural thing, and you know, it just happens. It works for itself. If it's not easy, then it's not love. And I disagree with that. I'm the person who is. We need to be sitting down, you know, every 6 months and can kind of like, okay, reevaluating. Yeah. Is this still going the right way? Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of the times people are sold this notion, and I'm going to say the media, even though I wasn't the media, so the media and social media, people say you'll meet someone and they'll love you so much you won't need to do any work because they'll be your soulmate and they'll get you. And unfortunately, that's hardly ever how it works because people aren't mind readers, and you're not consistent. You're not a constant thing all the time. You're also changing and evolving. And if you and your partner aren't keeping up with those changes with each other, you're going to lose each other at some point. And I think then people say, no, he wasn't the one. And I'm just like, well, he might have been the one when you met him, you know, a few months or a couple of years back, but you've changed. You're not a static thing, and he's changed. He's not a static thing. His needs have changed. Everything's changed. And have you checked in with each other? Are you saying, is this working for you, my love? And it says, no, this is why it's not working. Can we come to a meeting place where we can agree this is what we're going to change? If not, then, you know, it's not going to work.
Kofi, because, I mean, I always say it's almost like, you know, like a GPS, you get into a car. It won't say to you, okay, mainland is in 14 Ks, and then let you sit there. It says recalculating, you know, drive for 800 kilometers and then turn left and that. And I feel like that's the way we should be approaching relationships, constantly saying things that take us in certain directions. So do you follow on from what Zukiswa is saying?
I do. I think the challenge that we're having right now, the greatest fear that a lot of guys have, especially guys who consider themselves staunch traditionalists or culturalists, is the idea of changing what they already know and what they've come to accept as the norm. But once again, in a society this complex, you can't really say what is normal. For example, you could be a staunch a Pedi man, proud Pedi man, for example. Nothing against Pedi guys. I'm just saying.
Oh, I love it when you do this to yourself.
Okay, all right. An African man. Let's leave it at that. An African man, and you have defined what an African man looks like and feels, or does. But the reality is, this is a huge continent. So manhood in Ghana is perceived one way. Manhood in Nigeria is perceived another way. Manhood in Ivory Coast is perceived another way.
In Somalia, in Zimbabwe,
in Kenya.
Right.
Exactly. So, in this global context, we firstly need, last conversation we're talking about how we need to redefine masculinity.
Yeah.
But we also need to redefine what it means to be African. Or maybe even remember what it means to be African. Because we've lost touch with a lot of what we consider old, played out, and non-functional or useless. But the reality is a lot of the wisdom that we practiced back then is needed today. Women need to be pushed, elevated. Women need to be pushed to the front because we really do ourselves a disservice by pushing down our daughters, pushing down our sisters, pushing down our spouses. How do you grow as an individual? How? If she's not growing, how are you challenged?
You're not growing either.
Yeah. So,
Listen, I'm pretty sure you're sitting and you're like, what? I want you to jump in on the conversation. Send us your WhatsApp voice note. We'll put the number on the screen right now. 20 seconds. Let us know. Do you want to jump in? Are you debating? Are you for? Are you against? What are your views on this? Trust me, this is only going to get better. We'll check you after the break. Come back to us. Welcome back to Real Talk right here on SABC 3, where the stage is yours. Are you the kind of girl who's bold enough to send the guy that you've been eyeing a drink to show your interest? Maybe you're the kind of man who's not intimidated by being with a woman who makes more money than you. Or do you believe that men and women each have their designated roles in relationships and that they need to just stick to them? Today we're going through some of the traditional rules in dating and relationships and finding out whether some of these rules could benefit from changing and keeping up with modern times. Kofi Ofori-Boateng as well as Zimela are still with me and we're like just taking this apart. Would you, because here's the thing, it's like, people, even my director said to me now, I asked my now husband out on a date, otherwise I'd still be single. He would never come up to me. And I'm just like, okay, girl, go get yours. But would you do that?
Ask a guy out?
Yeah.
I think I have. For a date or for coffee?
Yeah.
No, I would, because for me, I feel like if you like someone, you should do something about it. And waiting about does you a disservice. And I'm always about, doing what makes you happy. So if you feel like, this is where I want to be with this person and I'm going to try and get them, you should do it.
But then, these are the things that now we want to then, not even unpack, we want to destroy so that it's forever done. Kofi, as women, we are, I don't even know if we were raised. I don't know where we picked up this conventional wisdom, but we picked it up somewhere. That if a man likes you, he will make the move, right? Yeah. Yet there are many women out there who made the first move, and they're fine, they're happy, they're in long-term relationships, they're married, they're basically happy. Yeah. So where's the truth in that? Who lied?
All right. Society is not always the most honest or reliable source for a lot of things. And like you rightly said earlier, there are billions of people on this planet. Each of these people are individuals. Each of this person has a way that they want to be approached, they want to be spoken to, they want to be communicated with, they want to be loved. So observation helps, get to find out how this person perhaps would like to be approached. And also be true to yourself. If you are that person who's going to take the initiative and go talk to him, because the reality of the situation is this: not every guy is confident enough to approach you. That's the reality.
90% of guys.
Most guys don't have the courage, especially if you're the one that he really wants, because he's already dealing with self-esteem and self-worth issues. He's wondering if he's on your level. He's wondering if he's good enough to be with you. He's already created this image of you in his mind. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is, if you do approach him, what energy are you giving off? And what impression are you creating?
You're nodding, you're going to comment after this. So yes, carry on. What energy are you giving?
What energy are you giving off and what impression are you creating about yourself? Because I think for some women, the mistake they make is that they think that by approaching a guy, it means, okay, fine, let's let me do, since he's talking to me, since he's giving me access, let me give him what he wants first.
Oh,
So,
snap.
so I don't think many guys have an issue with being approached.
Yeah.
I think it's the impression that you create of yourself. Because in order for him to take you seriously, he needs to see that you take yourself seriously. And if you make it easy for him, and here's a distinction, asking him out does not make you easy. Giving him what he wants at the risk of what you want, and at the risk of your peace, is what makes him see you as easy. So he can tell that you don't want to necessarily give it up, but you did.
Yeah. I think that's very important for me, because I think, like, what if it's something that you also want? And the conversations I have with my friends often is that, you know, I think guys have this misconception about what women want, you know, if they're feeling bad about doing certain things, you know, like giving it up on the first date or to being the ones to do this.
What you're saying, men can see that you feel bad about it.
Yeah. And so you need to be confident in yourself and like yourself enough to draw a line. And this is what you're saying. So draw a line in the sand and say, I'm willing to go this far and no further. And, you know, I've put myself in this position and I'm driving this ship in a way that makes me feel comfortable. And I need you to respect my boundaries. And I need to be strong enough to kind of feel like I'm not going to capitulate to anything. I'm just going to stand my ground and be that person.
You guys have just opened another, I consider myself a pretty, like, you know, to-do person. I'm in there, but like this is another round now, and I'm pretty sure many women are agreeing with you and very thankful. Okay, so now I've approached him and we're going on a date. Because I approached him, who pays for the date?
No, I can pay for the date.
Yeah.
If I can afford to pay for the date, we can go 50-50. For me, I always bring money if I'm going out with a man. And I think, like, it's the responsible thing to do.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable enough to discuss the thing with the person that you're going with beforehand, that helps, because then you know where the expectations are.
Yeah.
If you're going to go with somebody and you're not going to bring any money, you're sitting there and you're both staring at each other, and now it's getting awkward, and you're like, well, this is...
eating the
you know? Yeah. I mean, a lot of women, I think, also still expect the guy to do that on the first date. It's different people. I don't know. Like,
you see, because my question now is, if we are at a point where I'm allowed to ask a man on a date, then I can't come with that misconception that, okay, then he must pay for the date.
No, you pay.
Or am I wrong, Kofi?
No.
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Okay, so on the one hand, if you're going to ask him, at least make the offer to pay.
Yes.
At least make the offer.
Yeah.
And then let his upbringing and let his personal philosophy kick in. I think the assumption that a lot of women make is that, you know, since we're in the big city, since we're all urban now, that he is ready to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that, but women also need to accommodate us as men.
Yeah.
Firstly, on the one hand, you're saying, I'm an independent, strong woman. I don't need you. That's already created an impression. Then some women go on the date already with a bit of an attitude like, you know, I don't need your money. That's gonna create another impression. Then thirdly, you're gonna sort of impose your set of expectations on him of what a gentleman should behave like without even taking time to get to know him, what his personal style is, and that's already gonna put him off. So come expecting to pay, come make the offer to pay. If he is that way inclined, he will pay for it. He will do the right thing and pay for it. But then again, when we go back to societal expectations, we need to...
And am I right in assuming that if what we're discussing earlier still stands, is that as we then, you know, date and we get to 6 months and 12 months, then we're creating new rules for ourselves. Sometimes I'll pay, sometimes you'll pay, sometimes we'll both pay. But obviously then communication lines are open and we're free to discuss that.
Exactly.
Is that right?
No, it's true. And I think, like, the more you talk about it is you know, the less frustrating it gets for you as a couple, and also you don't end up being upset, because I think, like, people do have resentment for people, and that's when the relationship is getting frustrating, because you're not saying anything. So my boyfriend doesn't do this for me, but did you tell him this is what you want? No, you didn't. You know, my boyfriend does this, or my partner does this and this and this, and this is not what I like. And it's just like, well, you're sitting there stewing in this resentment, and it's because maybe he did that in the beginning, and he's just decided, okay, you know, it's like 2 years in now, come on, you know, let's do this thing together probably. I might not be able to pay for all our dates.
Yes.
And you know my financial situation.
Yeah.
So does that mean we're not going to eat? And you're sitting there, it's like, my boyfriend and I don't go out. It's like, well, have you offered to take him out or do something? So having those conversations and making your own relationship, basically, planning your own relationship, your own journey, that will make a world of difference, I think, between two people.
All right, listen, Ziqubu and Kofi will be back later to help us understand how to set boundaries in our relationships after the break. Since men and women are so adamant about their gender roles in relationships, and that's what we are discussing today, are the rules different when it comes to same-sex relationships? We're about to find out after the break. Welcome back to Real Talk on SABC 3. The stage is yours. From the time we're little girls and boys, society confines us to our designated pink and blue lanes, right? And we're conditioned into how we're expected to behave as men and as women. It is with these perceptions that we enter into adult relationships. So what happens in the event of same-sex relationships? Is it perfect equality, or are there still some rules that one needs to abide by? To help unpack this further, I'm joined by actress, writer, director, and SAFTA winner, Thishiwe Ziqubu.
Hello.
By the way, you're coming back for a proper, let's talk about your career.
I hope so.
Let's talk about how badass you are. But right now, let's talk about you. So when it comes to love, you were married at 21 and at 2 months.
How do you know these things about me?
Then, then you split with the father of your child.
Yes.
And then you dated a guy for 6 years, right? And then you split from him, and now you are dating a woman.
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. Then you are the perfect person to speak to about this. Other roles, like these gender roles, like provider, a nurturer, are they as stringent when it comes to same-sex relationships?
I think it's a dangerous thing to put like a blanket over all relationships and say that same-sex relationships are 1, 2, 3, because I cannot speak for the entire community.
Okay.
I can speak for my relationship at present. I can speak for my personal expectations and my desires. And for me, I just have never been a fan of roles. In previous relationships at present, where people have to be put in boxes and told, you have to fulfill this function because you are... Because, again, these things come from society. Society dictates that. But these two people, what do they want? And I think that every individual within a set relationships needs to define that for themselves. Now, in a same-sex relationship, I think a lot of the expectations also from heterosexual society is that there must be a man in the relationship, even if it's two women.
So who's the guy?
So who's the guy here?
But there are women or born
I feel like now you are trying to impose yourself on, like, men sometimes feel within this toxic masculinity field of things that so even in same-sex relationships, they still must be a man for this thing to be valid, otherwise it's not a thing.
Because then you ask yourself when someone says, so who's the man in the relationship? You say, okay, so if I was the man in the relationship, what am I supposed to be doing different from her?
Well, there are people now that think this way, think that one of these women would then be the one who cooks, the one who works, being the other one. Okay. Now, things don't work like that. For me personally, I feel that people should be expressing who and what they want to be. There shouldn't be a, okay, yimi nozopega, and then when uzo relaxa because you are less or more effeminate looking than me. It cannot work that way. Those are all heterosexual constructs, you know. So like personally for me, uthi ubano sebenzayo, sonke siyasebenza, so then what? Then must I be the one that cooks because I prefer wearing skirts and you prefer wearing pants? It doesn't work that way. And things just become so much simpler when they're not based on ego. Because a lot of these things come from ego. Okay. Because let's go back to that head thing.
Yeah, let's go.
It comes from the person who is the head, like the boss of this relationship, right? Yeah.
the
So
decision maker, the breadwinner.
Yes. So I'm following, and you are the lead. You are the starring role in this film, and that doesn't make sense. If love is a partnership, then why do we need a leader? Why do we need a head? Why can't we, as two adults who love each other, come together and share lives together? You don't need a CEO for that.
Yeah.
So whether it's a heterosexual relationship or a same-sex partnership, you don't need a head. Let's both carry this.
So when it comes to, you know, the communication, because earlier I was speaking to Uzukis as well as Kofi, and things like, oh, who pays on dates, and who pays for holidays, and, you know, who asks who out. When it comes to you, it's fluid, it's equal, it sounds like you guys are running in a field, just anything goes.
Well, I suppose I'm very, very fortunate to be in a relationship where, and it's not to say that same-sex relationships work because like they are same-sex relationships. I'm in a relationship that works because my partner and I love and respect each other mutually. So because of that, ngoba asihlushwa inkinga zama-ego, we try not to, we aim to be the best people we can be at all times. Then there isn't that thing of, no, you pay because you are there. You know, there are no labels.
Yeah.
If we take away the labels, we give ourselves so much more freedom to just love each other.
Is that like a natural thing, or is that something that you discuss in the beginning? But Yazin, let's just don't expect anything, don't try be anything, don't put yourself in any type of way, just go. Or once again, is it because we're both women and we just think both as women, so there's no push and pull?
A lot of, for my partner Modisane and I, a lot of it did come naturally, and that's what made everything so special.
As with, I'm sure there are heterosexual relationships where it comes naturally,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So things like who pays, I love to be spoiled, I love to be pampered, but so does she. So sometimes I will pay, and sometimes she will pay, but there's no expectation on some, no, Modisane, you pay because you have a deeper voice than me. You know, like people do think that... some people have the assumption that Modisane is the man in the relationship.
Wait, she has a deeper voice than you?
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
Oh, it's my voice.
Like, I look at babes, nana.
So yeah, those things don't exist. So a lot of people think that those constructs must exist for us, but that's just to make themselves feel comfortable. So yeah, if we want to go away, we'll either split it, or she'll pay, or I'll pay. Hey, we're both freelancers. So we are at the time.
And when it comes to, you guys aren't married, let's say you want to get married, right? Have you discussed that? Do your families, believe in lobola? Because that's another thing.
Yes,
Like, who's going to pay lobola who?
Yeah.
But who said we believe in lobola? So let's start there. Do you believe in lobola?
I'm actually investigating the idea of lobola very deeply for many reasons. Partly for a film that I'm writing and directing, partly just to get an understanding of the world around us as it shifts.
As it shifts, I like that.
Yeah, because things aren't the same as they used to be. I personally, there are many things about the lobola system that I'm not a fan of, which is why I want to investigate it before I shun it and say, I don't believe in lobola. So I want to know what I'm talking about. I don't want to like just take a stand. And right now, the only thing that my view is based on is my own experiences, my own feelings, but I just would like to get to the root of exactly, especially in a same-sex relationship, because that's what matters for me. You know, then they cancel each other out, so let's just not.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because also, my understanding of lobola is it's the introduction of families to each other. But that's because long ago you weren't allowed to show who your boyfriend is and you weren't allowed to show who your girlfriend is. You know, the first time we see them, they must be coming to ask for your hand in marriage, which also in itself is stupid, because now you don't know the person your child is going off with, right? So if in that regard, then your families already know each other. So then you should just go to your house and I go to my house, and then you slaughter and then we're fine.
Exactly, and I think there's so many ways of giving thanks, and if a Thanksgiving ritual is what we need, then we're great fans of rituals, so we'll do all of that. And then the families will be, in a very culturally respectful way, joined. But this paying thing, as soon as a currency that is tied with so many things, that is tied with like just concepts that have nothing to do with who we are really. As soon as those things come into play, then you know, are we still doing what we're trying to do? Are we still just saying these families are coming together? I'm grateful, Ma, that you raised this woman for me, and vice versa. So yes, I have great respect for our practices, but I think they need to be practiced in a way where we understand where these things are coming from, and that they're not muddied by a lot of the westernization that has come on our culture, that people now think, because I mean, a lot of even homophobia itself thinks it comes from Africanness, and it's not. Patriarchy is not an African concept at all, for starters. So we just need to investigate things before we.
It's actually what Kofi was saying. It's like if you look at pre-colonial things, none of what we're subscribing to now is there. Okay, hold that. We're going to go deep into this conversation, which more often than not always turns into a debate. Speaking of debate, towards the end of the show, we're going to go into an uncomfortable scenario that crosses relationship boundaries, right? Gentlemen, talking to you now. How would you feel if your father-in-law paid for your new house with your bride? Ladies, would you risk siding with your dad over your husband because he holds the title deed? Think about this. In the last segment, it's going to be a huge debate. We're going to chat about it. You're going to send in your WhatsApp voice notes as well. Otherwise, when we come back, Cameron is in studio. You want to find out all about him. Come back to us. Welcome back to Real Talk right here on SABC 3. Thank you so much for joining us. Such an interesting conversation that we're having. We're talking about how dating and relationship rules are changing in 2018. I've been chatting to actress, writer and director Thishiwe Ziqubu. Joining us on the conversation now is PhD candidate in accountancy. Smart, we like that. And LGBTQI activist Cameron Modisane. Welcome to the show.
Thank you,
So just before we get into this, I read a tweet from @Junior Mafia, right, sometime this week, and he said, you know, the first time, your homosexuality was discussed on television and he was sitting with his family, it was on a talk show long ago, and the woman was dressed in a masculine way, she was wearing a suit and, with the short hair, giving that, and the guy was obviously in drag. So for him to have these conversations on TV is so important now in 2018 because this, there isn't a face of homosexuality. Do you know what I'm saying? There isn't a face, there isn't a look. It's just fluid. It is everyone and is everything. So I'm so glad that we can sit here, and have these conversations. You were previously married and you had a traditional wedding, ne?
Yes, I did.
So how did you navigate? Earlier, Thishiwe were talking about, the lobola thing when it comes to same-sex marriages, and you were there and you had a traditional one. How did you navigate that? Who lobolaed who? Was it an uphill climb with family?
I think, firstly, our families are both welcoming.
Good.
In terms of lobola, I think we decided that we were both going to lobola each other in terms of slaughtering of cows. There was an exchange of gifts between families, just to ensure that we're both welcome in the family as well. So, but then something which I want to emphasize is the fact that in gay relationships, there'll always be a top and a bottom. I know that Thishiwe said, they don't like labels, but the sad reality is that, we do have labels.
But that's because also you men, the thing about, when there's gay relationships, all of a sudden we think that you guys are feminine and you don't have characteristics that are ultimately masculine. Yeah. Men like to define things, right? Yes, they like that. So you men, there are too many relationships. So obviously they're going to be roles.
Precisely.
Obviously.
Precisely. For me, particularly, my preference is being top. So, for example, if I ask someone out, I prefer to be the hunter instead of being the hunted. So I prefer to pay for the first date just to show my authority and to show that, I'm the man, Here's the thing. With us as gay people, some people prefer not to have labels, have the whole 50-50 thing, but it doesn't work. I believe that you can't have anything with two heads is a beast. So there has to be someone who's more of a leader in that role in terms of to give the direction and guidance in the whole relationship in terms of where do we actually want to go as a couple. Because if we both try to be
leaders
on the same level, it's going to be a power struggle, and it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, look, okay, okay. Do you discuss this up front? Because it would be a very strange conversation to have, like they were having our drink, so I like to lead, you better be ready to follow.
One thing which, in terms of me, if I'm shelling someone, I make it up front, I don't negotiate in terms of this whole roles thing. Like I make it like straight up front, One thing I've learned is that bottoms like asking, are you top or bottom? Tops don't ask that. They just tell you, I'm top, and it ends there. And you just have to take it or leave it. So do you... And then, obviously, you do find that...
You're speaking on behalf of yourself. I don't want everyone who's gay is like, who are la putu, what nonsense, namiek. So are you speaking on behalf of yourself, or is this how it generally goes?
I'm speaking on behalf of myself. But then also, what you find is that also, especially in townships, and you find that, for example, the bottoms the more feminine
terms of the
gays,
followers.
yeah. They have the more economic power, and then you find the after nines, for example, who actually ask them to buy them drinks, for example. So that's how it would actually work out in terms of, you know, a bottom will have more money, for example, in a championship setting, who's more feminine, and then you find that maybe the after nine, for example, you know.
Cameron, I mean, being gay means that you are clearly in a lot more gay circles than most, right?
Sure.
Obviously, you interact with other gay couples who don't think like you.
Of course I do. And I always fight with them, and it's always an argument because of how I think.
Okay.
And, of how I think. And
because today's topic is basically about, you know, the modernized way of like, the role changing in relationships in 2018. But, and I'm not judging you, and I'm glad that you are steadfast and you're like, I am moving, but you quite traditional in your thinking.
Yeah, you know what's the thing? Some people prefer the more heteronormative type of setup, and some people don't. For me, I prefer it like that, because I prefer that, you know what, someone needs to take the lead in order for the relationship, for us to actually go somewhere.
Thishiwe, are we not, because I can see you and we like judging him, we're like, what are you talking about?
trying so hard not to judge
I know, and he can see it, but he's like, I don't care, I say what I say. But now, are we not judging him because we expect gay men to be like softer and more effeminate, right? And he's out here on some, no, this is how I think and this is the way it's gonna go.
No, for me, it's not even coming from a gay, heterosexual thing, because I personally don't believe in boxes.
Okay.
Anyone that does, I just feel strongly about that belief. So, in as far as making it a gay societies operate this way, I definitely, obviously, don't think it's true, and I don't think that's what you're saying.
I'm saying
because,
that,
there are people that want to be fluid.
Exactly.
And there are a lot of those, and there are people that find... I suppose I'm a fan of the investigation of where those things come from also, because it feels, for me, like it is inherited from cancerous systems, you know, like patriarchy and... a lot of things that religion has taught about who and what a man is, and then we...
You see, this is the thing. I feel like well, for me personally, not you, I feel like I'm in a place where I think patriarchy doesn't exist in gay relationships because there's two of you. Meanwhile, you're out here and you're flying the flag.
You know, what's the biggest challenge which you're faced with as gay men?
Yeah.
Most of our relationships don't last.
Really?
It's a fact.
Okay.
Especially as young black gay men, it's just that
why would you? Why
it's difficult.
Is that?
It's difficult to find love. It's difficult to find true love. I think maybe it's because of society where we come from and the lack of acceptance, homophobia, and we don't have positive role models in society to look
up to.
Exactly.
But
precisely.
perhaps then you shouldn't be looking for a gay person to be a role model and just be a person who's good at love.
Yeah, but you know, when two guys are together, sometimes it's just too much, you know.
But don't you think that those the very kind of roles you're trying to put in the relationship might be part of the problem? Because here are two beings. Now let's take sex and gender out of the question. Here are two beings that just want to love each other. Why can't these two beings just be and just love without having to? Oh, okay, now am I following? Am I following right?
Am I leading? Am I
leading right? Yo, now there's so much thinking.
Yeah.
There's so much. Yo, now there's so much pressure to like try and do all these things, and it becomes harder to love.
I do appreciate that, but I think, honestly, you do find vest men, you know, like people who are like receive and who give and take. But still, as well, you still find those problems as well. So it's like an endemic thing, which is there, which you can't run away from. So it's not always that, you know what, if two men are both equal, then it'll last. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen at all.
I disagree with you, but I'm out of time. I really want you to come back because now you've just, you know what you've done? You're a beast. Now there's two heads. And I'm just like, no, I really want you to come back. I think we might, because if there's a lot of people thinking like you, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's different to what I believe. We need to sit down and possibly this is the beginning of us killing that thing of you saying gay relationships don't last.
Yeah.
Because I do. Because I don't.
I know so many.
Yeah, I don't.
have many gay friends that have lost.
I don't. Okay, look, we've looked at couples setting boundaries together in their relationships, but what about setting your individual boundaries that your partner needs to respect? We wrap up our discussion on love in 2018 and in the modern times after the break. Come back. Welcome back to Real Talk. We've been discussing changing dating rules in 2018, as well as talking relationship boundaries with our guests, Kofi Ofori-Boateng, Zukisa, as well as Thishiwe Ziqubu. When young couples are first starting out, they find themselves overwhelmed by debt from wedding or from buying their new home together, or just because they ain't getting paid enough money, guys. This is South Africa, you know the economy. Wouldn't it be wonderful if your parents could pitch in to help ease the pressure of debt? Well, how would you feel if your father offered to buy you and your husband your new home? Would you accept it as a gift or view it as your father stepping over the boundaries that you and your husband have set for the relationship? Now, this discussion happened on social media about a week and a half ago, and I was fascinated. This is why I like, here they are smart, they are evolved, they are rounded. Let's talk about it. Kofi, you're married, your wife's father says, here's a house, live in it.
All this pressure, like look at this. Yeah.
What do you say?
Well,
it's
that would depend on the terms and conditions that come with it. I'm not opposed to it, but we need to be very specific as to what this is going to cost me, if it's going to cost me anything.
Yeah.
Going back to
Cost you, and costing is not financial here.
costing is not necessarily financial, but
yeah.
In terms of my soul, in terms of what do I have to give up? Does this mean that you're not going to tell me how to run my family? Are you going to give me a curfew? What expectations do you now have of me? Do I take your side when I find out you're doing things to your wife you're not supposed to be doing? What exactly are we? What's going on here? Are you doing this for your daughter? Great, put it in her name. I don't mind.
Okay.
But let's just be very clear as to what the boundaries are.
What is your intent?
What is your intent?
What is your intent? Zukisa?
No, I've had this conversation also with my friends, and my initial reaction was always just like, yes, Dad, get me the things, everything.
I'm not,
And now that Kofi is speaking for me, it's just I've never actually thought about it in what it would cost, and not necessarily financially, because I think if I love and I respect you, I'd have to think about, what this actually means for you, and, what the dynamic then is with you and my family, or you and my father, and you and me. So I think that's something that's really interesting that you should think about. For me personally, it'd just be like, yes, let's get the house. But I also just think opening that conversation means that we'd have to actually just interrogate it. Because I want it, I think it would make financial sense for us if my dad's like, okay, this is what I'm giving to you, but I need to figure out whether the financial sense is worth actually what I have with my partner, if it's going to cause any conflict. So this is interesting. I've never actually thought of it like that.
Thishiwe?
I'm down, man. Bring the house. We ain't got no issues. Yeah, I think I suppose it's simpler. And this is, again, after speaking to Cameron, we know this is specific to just me. So maybe in other same-sex relationships, there would still be power struggles. But because we're trying to take power in that form out of the relationship, then,
I think something else that we also need to consider here is that this is a form of generational wealth.
Yes.
So we're talking about debt.
Yeah.
Because young people have to start out in life on their own steam.
Yes.
Whereas children from well-off families get given a helping hand.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we think it's unmanly to be helped by your parents or to be helped by your spouse's parents.
Yeah.
I know of guys who have great jobs, they're making tons of money from their businesses, whose fathers-in-law will give them a home. Not because you're a freeloader, but because he sees that you are a man worthy of a gift of that.
And you're going to be able to maintain
And you'll be able to
'Cause
maintain
if you're
it.
giving me a house of 5 million, best believe it's 25,000 rand a month to maintain. I'm not going to give you that money as well every month, right?
Exactly.
You've changed my mind a little, because I was like, no, guys. No. There's no ways I'm taking anything. Okay, there's a WhatsApp voice note, very interesting, and it's a guide. Roll it, please.
Hi, Anele. It's Lwazi from Butterworth, Etuwa. Okay, my situation is I currently don't have a car, but my girl does, and she does the driving. I've offered to drive, but she resists, which makes me feel less of a man. Now, my friends poke fun at me for this. How do I approach this?
Maybe she's only insured for one driver. Have you ever thought about that? Maybe it's that. Kofi?
Okay. You're a couple, all right? So roll with it. Your friends aren't a part of that relationship. Your friends may have an opinion, but they're not a part of that relationship. If you feel emasculated or if you feel less of a man because of that, interrogate why you feel like less of a man. Is it because of your upbringing? Is it because of certain stereotypes that you were raised with? What is it exactly that's making you feel like less of a man? Now, if she's disrespecting you and telling you that you're less of a man because you don't have a car, that right there is a red flag. But if she's saying this is our car, and you know what, for all we know, you may not have a license. We don't know.
You are from Butterworth. I know my people. I know my people.
You know, you may not have a license, or you may have a bad driving track record, or it might be a new car and she thinks, you know what, let me get used to this car first, let me enjoy this car a little bit before I release it. Whatever it is, respect it. She's sharing the car with you. And then as you grow together in the ownership of this vehicle, at some point, when she feels confident enough, don't pressure her. She'll pass it on to you. Also, take this as an opportunity as a guy to challenge yourself to get one of your own as well, if it means that much to you.
I mean, I've dated guys, and some of them I allowed them to drive my car from word go. Some of them I'm like, come and out long. It's 6 months. I don't think there's like a specific thing to it, you know? So, Gisa, what's your take?
So for me, it's very interesting because I think, like he said, this makes me feel less like a man. And I think we prop ourselves up with things that make us feel either masculine or feminine, and it's either you're a provider or you're really beautiful, you this and this. And so you create this idea of yourself propped up by all these things that don't really mean anything. So you don't have a car, that, you know, it doesn't mean anything. And I think it's important for us to look inside ourselves and find out, why do I feel like I need all these props? Why do I feel like I need all these things or these stories that I'm telling myself about who I am to make myself feel important? Because once those go, then you're left with nothing. Like, you sort of dissolve into nothing because you haven't sort of built that core sense of self, of who you are as a person.
Thishiwe, 40 seconds, because Isidingos, they're ready. They're at Horizon Deep, they're ready to roll. So 40 seconds, what's your take on it?
I think people are just putting a whole lot of unnecessary pressure on each other and on themselves. And now let's go to now a little boy who's growing up being told that he has to be all these things. If he's going to be a man, he has to have the car, pay for the house. In this climate, and still know himself and trust himself and still nurture and care and love. I think there's just so much pressure because we've created these roles. I think we actually just need to get rid of them altogether, because now here's a man who just wants to love his wife or his woman, and he can't because of a car.
Now, a monthly installment is determining how you feel about yourself. Stop that. Listen, thank you so much to my guests, Kofi Ofori-Boateng, Zukisa Zimela, Thishiwe Ziqubu, as well as Cameron Modisane. We're back with you on Thursday with the guy who last November made fans very happy with his return to YFM's morning show. Ankle Tap will be here. He's joined by Family Tree's Rap Queen, opening for Chance the Rapper in April. Ankle Tap is here, as well as Nadia Nakai. They're both coming out to play. We will see you on Thursday at 6 p.m. Isidingo's up next. Don't go anywhere. Bye.